All right, if I can get everybody's attention, please. Welcome to our seminar tonight. Very pleased with the turnout. Very good. What we hope that you are going to get out of this are the answers to these questions. What are the new changes to the handicap system? What should a handicap committee be doing? What are the tools and resources for handicap chairs and handicap committees? And what are the best practices for tournament committees to follow in reference to handicapping? So they're not going to necessarily be in this order, but rather kind of just baked in all together into this conversation. And my name is Lexi, if you don't know. I'm the manager of member services. I will be doing the first half of the presentation. And Caleb Cox in the back is our executive director. He'll be doing the second half. So we're going to go over the changes for 2024. So while this presentation is open to the public, our target audience tonight is the handicap chairs and golf professionals, but you'll still get a lot out of this regardless. This is not an exhaustive list, but a list of principal changes that are most relevant for clubs. And interpretations within the rules of handicapping are now called clarifications. This is just consistent with the 2023 rules of golf. The red banner will also be used throughout the presentation to identify slides that include changes to the system. So Rule 1, the purpose and authorization obtaining a handicap index. The purpose of the World Handicap System is to enhance the enjoyment of the game of golf and to give as many golfers as possible the opportunity to obtain and maintain a handicap index, use their handicap index on any golf course around the world, and compete or play a casual round with anyone else on a fair and equitable basis. And these are the other topics that are going to be covered in detail throughout the presentation. Establishing a course rating and slope rating for each set of tees, converting a handicap index into a course handicap, playing handicap to create equity, assessing the impact of playing conditions at each course on a given day, limiting the maximum hole score for handicap purposes to a net double bogey, ensuring that each player's handicap index is calculated consistently at the end of each day, and conducting a handicap review on a regular basis. So the stakeholder responsibilities is we're just trying to ensure the rules are being implemented and administered properly by the player, the golf club, handicap committee, the regional golf association, the national association, the USGA, and RNA. Rule 2, scores acceptable for handicap purposes. The scores a player submits for handicap purposes are at the core of the calculation of their handicap index. Rule 2 covers the conditions a score must satisfy for it to be acceptable for handicap purposes, providing confidence that it will produce reasonable evidence of the player's ability and ultimately a handicap index that is reflective of the demonstrated ability. So some examples of acceptability of scores. So a score is acceptable for handicap purposes if the round has been played in an authorized format of play in the company of at least one other person by the rules of golf on a golf course with a current course rating and slope rating and during an active season. A score is unacceptable for handicap purposes if it's been played under the following scenarios. Again, this following illustration list is not exhaustive, and if a player is in doubt as to the acceptability of a score, it's recommended that they check in with the golf club that they're playing at or with their local AGA. Some guidance for the committees. In a situation where a player is disqualified from a competition for a breach of the rules of golf, but no significant scoring advantage has been gained, the score should remain acceptable for handicap purposes. For example, the player did not sign their scorecard and no model local rule was in place to modify penalty. The player proceeded under the alternative option to the stroke and distance relief procedure, even though the model local rule was not in effect. or the player used a distance measuring device while the model local rule prohibited their use was in effect. So the final determination is at the discretion of the committee, just based on the circumstances. So the hole not played by the rules of golf and general play, where a player has breached the rules of golf and general play and knowingly failed to apply the correct penalty, the score should not generally be accepted for handicap purposes. However, depending on the circumstances, the committee has a discretion to produce an acceptable score by recording the actual score for the hole, or adjusting the hole score using net double bogey, or applying a score of net par. So the big change here for 2024 is that applying a score of net par for such scenarios wasn't an option under the 2020 rules of handicapping. Minimum number of holes to be played. For a 9-hole score to be acceptable, all 9 holes must be played over 9 holes with a current course rating and slope rating. For an 18-hole score to be acceptable, at least 10 holes must be played. When 10 to 17 holes are played, the player must post their score using the hole-by-hole option. So previously, the minimum number of holes that were to be played for a 9-hole score was 7 holes, and 14 holes for an 18-hole score. So there's no formula to post a score by playing less than 9 holes, so you just have to play at least 9 holes. Rule 3, adjustment of hole scores. A score for handicap purposes should not be overly influenced by 1 or 2 bad hole scores that are not reflective of a player's demonstrated ability. In addition, incomplete scores and/or scores where a player did not hole out on every hole can provide reasonable evidence of the player's ability and can be used for handicap purposes. Rule 3 covers the circumstances where scores may be acceptable and how these hole scores should be adjusted. So the maximum hole score for handicap purposes is net double bogey. A player's maximum hole score for handicap purposes equal to par of the hole plus 2 strokes plus any handicap strokes that the player receives on that hole. So without net double bogey, bad hole scores would inflate a golfer's handicap index and be contrary to measuring a golfer's demonstrated ability. We're not looking at high scoring rounds in the calculation of a handicap index, and we're not giving the occasional high hole score too much weight on an otherwise good round. So here's an example straight out of the rules of handicapping. John Smith has a course handicap of 16. This means that he receives 1 handicap stroke on holes allocated 1 through 16 on the stroke index of the scorecard. So on the 17th hole, where he receives a stroke, his gross score of 9 would be reduced to 7. So as a result, his gross score of 88 is reduced to an adjusted gross score of 86 for handicap purposes. So double bogey plus is not an official term, but has resonated really well with golfers. Hole-by-hole score posting is just also really recommended, so that those gross scores are automatically adjusted for those net double bogeys. And for plus handicap players, instead of double bogey plus, it would be double bogey minus. And the player works backward using the reverse order of the stroke index allocation. So, for example, a player with a course handicap of plus 3 can post a double bogey on holes allocated 1 through 15, and a bogey on holes with a stroke index of 16, 17, and 18. So when a hole is not played, a score from an incomplete round or when 1 or more holes have not been played may only be used for handicap purposes if, among other things, the round has been played over at least the minimum number of holes required for either a 9-hole, so 9 holes required, or an 18-hole score, so at least 10 holes, to be acceptable, and as long as the reason for not completing the round was valid. Invalid reasons can include whether that does not prevent the continuation of play, not playing a particular hole to avoid a high hole score, not playing the final holes on a golf course in order to avoid submitting a high score if you're playing bad, or a low score if you're playing really well, and any other situations considered unreasonable by the committee. So if the player's reason for not playing one hole or more holes is considered invalid, the score is not acceptable, but the handicap committee may consider posting a penalty score to the player's scoring record. And we'll get into penalty scores a little later. So some benefits to the 10 to 17 hole scores. We're going to see more consistency than if they were to apply net par for remaining unplayed holes. It's flexible. You know, you can play as little as 10 holes now. And you'll have that score differential for an 18-hole score differential in your scoring record. When 10 to 17 holes have been played, a value is calculated from the holes played. Then the expected score is used for any holes not played. These values are added to determine the 18-hole score differential. The player will be required to post their hole-by-hole scores. Again, we just really want to stress that. And then the expected score is based on the average score differential of a player with a given handicap index and a normal distribution of scores. So it's not specific to each player. So here's an example. Jane Smith played 16 holes before stopping play. Through 16 holes, her adjusted gross score was a 78. As a result, a score differential will be created for the 16 holes that she played, and the player's expected score will be used for the 2 holes that were not played. These two values will then be added together to create an 18-hole score differential for immediate use. Yes?
So, if we're using hole-by-hole scoring, are they supposed to figure out what they get for 16, 17, 18? Or do they just do hole-by-hole scoring, submit their score, and...
Yep. The system will do it for you.
The system will do it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what I was thinking,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to be sure.
I'll
Same thing 10 through 17.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
even take that a step further. If you go into the app right now and go punch in 15 holes worth of scores, you can actually now hit a submit button with only 15 holes.
Okay.
Yep.
And it will automatically do it for you. The purpose of actually getting to this, but you know, Lexi had a slide here a second ago that talked about consistency. That's a big word that the USGA is trying to start using a little bit more. Is that if you get people doing the same thing every time, it is going to be more consistent. What I'm sure that they found with net par and things of that nature, and they've found this for years and years, is that people don't, even as much education as you can put together, people still don't do it right. Right? And so this way actually addresses that. That maybe all they really have to do is hit that button. It's going to apply it the same to everybody no matter what. So really, really positive thing that we're looking at.
Well, why is it only 10 to 17? Why is it 10 to 18?
Because you didn't play the
Valid.
full 18.
I mean, if you play 18, you've got a full 18-hole score. But all you've got to do is get to between 10 and 17 holes.
So 17 is the maximum number of holes that you have to play to post an 18-hole score. And the 18th hole is posted automatically for you?
Well, no, if you play 18, you put a score in and it
Right.
goes 18. Right. What it's saying here is that it's going to automatically assign a value to hole number 18 if you only play 17 holes.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
You leave it blank.
And so if you leave it blank, and what it's doing is,
So every time that you're not going to play, you have a potential for not playing 18 holes. You have to post your score from 10 to 17 hole by hole?
yes, correct, yes. So in the World Handicap System, they actually have been stressing quite a bit for the last several years, actually posting hole by hole. The difference between these two pictures here is that it talks about the 9-hole versus 10 versus 17, 10 to 17.
Right.
9-hole, you actually, if you just are posting a 9-hole score, you don't have to do it hole by hole. It'll just go in as a 9-hole score. So you can add it up yourself, whatever you want to do. You just have to play at least 9 holes.
Well,
Right.
what happens if you decide something happens on hole 15 and you don't get to finish?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to post 10 to 15 hole by hole, And then the program puts in an expected score for the rest of them.
Yep.
We will get further in depth into 10 to 17 here in a minute. This is kind of, this part of the presentation is really just kind of showing the math of how it does it, but also the understanding that 9 holes is different than 10 to 17. Yeah.
Yep, so the estimated course rating is then determined by adding the 9-hole course rating from the front 9 to the estimated 7-hole course rating from the back 9 to create a 16-hole course rating. The estimated slope rating for the 16 holes played is also determined, and this just kind of shows you how it's done. So then the player's adjusted gross score over 16 holes, which was a 78, is used in the score differential calculation, along with the 16-hole estimated course and slope ratings to determine a 16-hole score differential for the holes played. So for the result is a 16-hole score differential of 12.8. And finally, an expected score differential for Jane is determined for 2 holes not played, which is equal to 2.12. And that value is added to her 16-hole score differential to create an 18-hole score differential that will be entered into her scoring record. And just remember, a player's expected score is based on the average score differential of a player with a given handicap index and a normal distribution of scores, so it's not specific to each player. Her expected score differential of 2.12 was determined using her handicap index of 16.0 from when the round was played. So this is how it's going to look in the scoring record. There's not going to be a unique score type for 10 to 17 holes played, but like clubs and like the Idaho Golf Association will be able to report on these instances. So you'll see here that she shot a 78, and then in parentheses is the number of holes that she played, which was 16. So I know that's really
I have a
small.
question.
Yeah.
In the past, well, according to the handicaps, and you're a new golfer, you don't have a handicap, you have to post 3 scores,
54 holes. Yeah.
3 scores in order to have a handicap calculated for you, correct?
Yeah.
And now, suppose I post 3 9-hole scores. I'm a new golfer. Will those 3 9-hole scores count as if they were 18-hole
Caleb,
scores?
correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think they do. No.
No,
You have to
it
have
still is a
3
requirement
18s.
that you have to have 54 actually played holes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
it is
all
still
right.
a requirement, and that will not change.
That
Because the way the system works is it bases your 18-hole differential off of your handicap index. Well, if you don't have 54 holes in there, do you have a handicap index?
54 actual holes.
You do not. The system will not give you a handicap index until you have actually posted 54 holes worth of golf.
Okay.
And so all 54 of those must be played.
54 holes.
Mhm.
It could be 3,
It could be 6 nines, yeah,
It could be 6 9s, okay.
54
Right.
holes.
All right,
but it will not do it unless you have an index.
so that's different from what we had before then, in terms of, so yes and no, it is.
Yeah, you're asking, you're basically drawing the distinction between, whereas you could have gone net par before,
Yeah,
which technically is still not right.
yeah.
Because if you don't have an index, you can't net par.
I know, I understand.
Right, yeah,
Right, exactly.
yeah.
Okay.
Anybody have any questions? I am going to hand this over to Caleb, and he's going to take it over from here.
Thanks, Lexi.
Yes, thank you.
All right, let's get into this next bit. Eligibility to submit a score. You all know lots about eligibility to submit a score. Once again, this is a major point of just urging golfers to post that score as soon as possible. Okay? In the last few years, we've learned about the PCC calculation. That doesn't work unless you've posted it the day of, right? There are things that work in the system that are really important for posting the day of. So the score posted here in this particular scenario that they're talking about should be posted by the player, handicap committee, committee in charge of a competition, or by anyone else authorized by the player. There is, I mean, we get questions every now and then. Well, what happens if my buddy goes and posts it? Well, did you tell him to go post it? Well, yeah. Well, you're fine. What does it matter, right? You get a lot more questions about, well, my buddy went and posted it and I didn't ask him to. Okay, well, go talk to your handicap committee and maybe they'll remove it for you. Like, it's actually an okay thing to do. However, then there should be some flags in that handicap committee's brain of, well, did he post a score for that day? His buddy probably posted it on purpose because he didn't. You know, maybe there's some things we need to be paying attention to here. Okay? Certification of a score posted for handicap purposes must be made available for peer review. A handicap committee is responsible for providing oversight and ensuring players are posting all acceptable scores. It's strongly recommended that the committee in charge of the competition, wherever possible, post all the player scores on behalf of the player rather than asking players to go do it for themselves. That makes a lot of sense, right? If the tournament committee posts it, they all get posted. If you ask players to do it, do they all get posted? No, not always, right? So it makes a lot of sense that it should be the tournament committee that does it. And you should also advise players, hey, we're posting these. You don't have to. No duplicate scores, right? Okay, handicap index calculation here. Here's the principle of the rule. Handicap index calculation includes mechanisms that take into consideration the conditions in which a round was played. Okay, remember previously demonstrated ability within a defined period of time, okay? We still got that system, demonstrated playing ability. We have the cap still that has a soft cap, hard cap, limits upward movement, and apply additional adjustments to a player's index when an exceptional score is submitted, okay? So Rule 5 covers all of these processes. These things have not really changed. We're only going to show you the things that really have changed. So, you've seen this before. There's no red flag in the top right-hand corner. Calculation of a differential has not changed. This is just in words what that calculation is. Score differential equals 113 over slope rating. 113 is, of course, your median slope rating, okay, of which the handicap system is derived. And then you take that times your adjusted grossed score minus course rating minus PCC adjustments, okay? All that is a fancy way to say this. Here's an example of a player. Their adjusted gross score is 85. Course rating was 68.7. Slope rating was 117. When plugged into all those fancy words we just came up with, their score differential is a 15.7. Once again, not something that you have to do ever. The system does it for you, but it's just nice to know sometimes how they got to that number. Okay? Here's where it gets fun. The calculation of a score differential for a 9-hole score. We're using this word. We're using this word expected score, right? So in this particular scenario, whenever you start talking about the 9-hole score, it's going to give them an expected score that goes with it. And it is going to be based off of their handicap index, okay? Now, if you have a handicap index that's 11.2 and I have a handicap index that's 11.2, is it going to be the same score? If we shoot the same thing on the front 9, we shot 42. You're an 11.2, I'm an 11.2.
I think so.
It is, absolutely. Because it's not a golfer by golfer thing, okay? But it is a calculation that's used for an 11.2 that is already built into the system, okay? Now, if I shoot 41 and you shoot 42 and we're both 11.2, is it going to calculate the same score? No, because we shot one stroke different. Make sense? It's very rudimentary, very specific that they have it built into the back end of the system that if you have the same handicap index as somebody else and you plug in a 9-hole score, it's going to plug in a back 9 for you and automatically beat them as a 18-hole score. Yes?
Regardless of tee that you're playing from?
Ah,
It's
good
your
question.
index.
If the tee changes, then all of your calculations change, don't they, right? Good point, good point. Any more questions on that? Yeah.
Does it matter whether your score is a tournament situation or not?
In the system, there's no calculation change
Okay.
based off of tournament versus not. The only thing that a tournament score does, or competition score in this case, is denoted with a C, It just shows it in the system as this was a competition score that helps.
Everybody that's run a league knows that people don't play the same in a league as they play their regular golf game.
Let me rephrase what you just said for everybody to hear. He just said that people don't keep an accurate handicap.
It's not necessarily that, though. I mean,
and I would agree with you. I mean, there's some discrepancy for
stresses
sure.
that people feel playing a league.
I would also.
They don't feel playing a recreational.
I would okay, and I would
regardless of the score.
absolutely. I would say it's probably not even that they don't keep an accurate handicap. I would say the discrepancy goes on both directions, though. They might play better than they normally play. They might play worse than they normally play at a tournament because they got all the jitters, right?
Yeah.
Make sense? So
And adding 2 9-hole scores, you're not as tired after 9 holes. And then when you sat them together, it'd be like, I could never shoot that if I was playing
Yeah, I
18.
mean, how many times do you play 18 holes on the same course, and you can't play the back 9 as good as the front 9, or vice versa. Sometimes you play the back 9 better.
So you're actually bringing up a really good point. And there's a question that's being asked across the world as we know it. In this particular rule, whenever we start talking about 9-hole scores. I got asked this question about 2 weeks ago from somebody in the IGA. The question is, we have 9-hole league. Should we wait till another 9-hole score is put together and put those together as an 18-hole score now? Or should we just go ahead and post them? What do you think?
You know, I will
Post
admit
them?
here,
Which way?
different.
We'll get there in just a second then. Anybody else? Post them, not post them?
Well, if it's gonna automatically give me another 9 holes regardless, I would wanna wait for my next week to play the
Okay?
back.
Here's what we ultimately have to lean on. USGA is using this word consistent. Okay? The system says post them. 9 holes. The 18-hole value will get it. If some clubs do it the way the USGA system says it, and some clubs don't, have we violated that word consistent? Yes, we have. You cannot make handicaps equitable to each other if we're doing things differently. Can't happen. Okay? And so, my answer for anybody going forward on what should we do with league scores? Should we post 9-hole scores or should we wait till there's another 9 posted? Because ultimately, if you do it the other way, your players' handicaps aren't going to travel the same way other clubs' handicaps are going to travel.
Okay, I see this as a great way to get new people established handicaps faster. I don't see it as being beneficial to people that are established handicaps playing in multiple 9-hole leagues. Because so now I play Ridgecrest on a Thursday and I get an 18-hole score posted because I played 9 holes. Then I play someplace else, Quail on Tuesday, and I get an 18-hole score posted because I played 9 holes. I don't.
Okay, so tell me.
Not a fan.
Okay, so tell me what the goal is. See, because here's the other thing that I actually told this other person too. Okay, every person in this room is completely smarter than the handicap system, right? We're all smarter than it. I mean, I'll even say I'm smarter than the handicap system. Do I like the idea that we're combining 9s or not combining 9s? I mean, I don't know, right? Is it making it more accurate? I don't think so. Well, are we after accuracy or are we after consistency? The player would tell you, I want the person's handicap over here to be the same as mine. I want it to be done correctly so that when I play against them, we're on level playing ground. So this is going to be an argument in this system completely and totally for the entire next year. Because I'm smarter than the handicap system. And I'm not trying to insult anybody. I don't want you to feel like I'm insulting you. What I'm trying to say is this, is that the consistency was the driving force behind this change. Is that we can, the same way we have a PCC calculation, the same way we don't know if people are applying holes not being played the same?
It's horrible. So is that 18-hole score on the next day based on the 9 holes you played that day? Or is it based on what your adjusted handicap is? Because you played a really good score the day before and it gets adjusted overnight. What's it based on?
If you're asking, did what I play yesterday impact my score that I ended up today, even though I only played 9 holes?
Yes, basically.
The answer is yes. Now, in all likelihood, how much is it actually affecting it? Is it the 12 scores in my record that aren't being counted right now? Probably, because I played really bad today, so it's not even counting anyway. So,
Well, as I was going to say earlier, I have an issue with posting 9-hole scores anyway, because you can play a really good 9 holes and you can play a really bad 9 holes, and even the average of those two doesn't necessarily equate to your level, your ability
Sure.
to play golf. So I've always not posted 9-hole scores.
Mm-hmm.
I've held them until I had another 9-hole score that was reasonable to the way I play.
okay, so what's the problem with that? Do you know what the
Well,
problem with that
it's
is?
subjective.
No, here's the-
Everyone's not doing it the same way.
But I'll tell you, and that's the point. We're trying to get to consistency, okay? But the problem with that approach is this, is you may, and here's the way I am with 9-hole scores too. Let's say I do it your way, okay? I'm not gonna post 9-hole scores except if I have another one to put together with, which the system actually used to do anyway. Last year, the system, it would hang on to it and it would wait for another one to come in, right?
Right.
So I played a 9-hole score in May, and then I played another 9-hole score, but I didn't play one until August. Which one's right? Because in May, my handicap is always higher than it is in August. But if I put those two together, now it's completely convoluted the system and put that score in August. Even though my score was higher over here and it's lower over here because I'm a better player in August than I am in May. And by the way, that's 100% across this great valley we have. Every single person is a better golfer by 2 strokes in August than they were in May. But if I combine those two, they don't really work anymore. And so what this is attempting to do, in addition to being consistent, is now it at least is representative of the handicap you're playing now. If we hold it over till later, it's no longer representative of what your handicap is now.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't hold a 9-hole score from May and add it to a 9-hole score in August.
Well, but the problem is that everybody's different. And so it's not consistent because you probably play every day or you play more often. You get the same scenario with another player that only plays 9 holes once in a blue moon, and those scores get combined. And
People that play 9 holes once in a blue moon are not going to report anything.
that's not true. I do it every day. Every time I play, I post. And
Yeah,
so
but you don't play from.
okay,
you don't go,
so now we're arguing the merits of a player, not the merits of the system. Okay, and that's not necessarily somewhere I want to go today. Okay, because that's for the handicap committee to make sure that the merits of the player are correct. Okay, what we're talking about is the system and where it's supposed to be going from here. Okay. And ultimately, what all of us are going to have to get behind to be able to enforce it too. Because if we don't, it will not be consistent.
So just post every score.
Post every score. 9 holes. 9 holes and more. Okay? All right. Let's keep moving on because I got to get to that 10 to 17 hole thing because it's an important deal, all right? This is an example of what happens with a 9-hole score. John Smith, he's a handicap index of 10. He shot 42 on the front 9. That figured his differential for that 9 holes as a 5.42, excuse me. Okay? And then the system determined that his back 9, according to his handicap differential, should be 6.38. So you add 5.42 to 6.38. And it gives his differential for the day at 11.8.
Does that take into account the differences of the course rating?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. It does the math the same way it's always done. It's just got one extra little piece of information in there that it didn't have before. Yep. Okay, so let's get to some examples because this is nice to see kind of up front, okay? So, course rating of 36, we've got an example of 3 different players here. A handicap index of 4, a handicap index of 10, and a handicap index of 16. All 3 players shot 42 on the same tee. So is their expected score going to end up the same on 18 holes? Absolutely not, because they're different handicap indexes. Okay? So a 4 goes to an 8.7 in this case. Obviously there's some numbers, this is all being washed through the slope rating, okay, of the course of the tee that's being played. Handicap index of 4 goes to an 8.7, handicap index of a 10 goes to an 11.8, handicap index of a 16 goes to a 14.9. Actually lower than their handicap index in this scenario, because they shot better than their handicap index on the front 9. Okay? Does that make sense? It is by handicap index ability level. It is not by, you'll get the same score as the same person next to you even though you got different handicap indexes. Okay? All right. Here's an example a little bit different this time. In this example, 3 players all have the same handicap index of 17.1. 2 players both shot the same adjusted gross score of 47, and 1 player shoots 49. Are their final differentials same or different? Player A and player B, they got the same index, they shot the same thing, they got the same number. Okay? But player C, same index, a little bit different front 9 score of 49, therefore that differential is a 13.3. 2 strokes higher, it's only 1.9 difference on the total 18. But the system automatically does it, okay? So this is some side-by-side numbers so that you see it, but the system, once again, is going to do all of this automatically. Important thing from this slide, it's kind of hard to see, is that this is actually going to show that those differentials are 9-hole scores the same way it did. It has an N next to it. Even though it's producing an 18-hole differential, it will still denote it in the system as a 9-hole score. So you'll still be able to track it and see it as such. Any questions?
So is this why, and I think I have this correct me if I'm wrong, why now people that post 3 9-hole scores will get their temporary handicaps, right? Because they're getting an 18-hole lead.
No, they still got to post 54 actually played
Oh,
holes.
they have to actually post 54.
Yeah, remember the system. If you get 9 holes, okay, you got 9 holes. How does it calculate your other 9 holes?
Based on the others.
Based on your handicap index. But if you don't have a handicap index, how would it do that?
Okay, gotcha.
Make sense? You don't have an index, therefore it can't. You have to post 54 holes. You have to play all 54. Preferred hole by hole. Okay? Make sense now? This is not a situation where we're trying to make it quicker for people to get a handicap. It's actually that situation has stayed the same. Make sense? Okay. Let's talk about committee actions, because that's what everybody's here for, to talk about what committees are supposed to do. Handicap review is covered in Appendix D, which we will cover here in a minute. Players can request a handicap review if they believe their handicap index no longer reflects their demonstrated playing ability. Handicap committee is required to work on to help them fulfill that request, okay? Reviews can be done for a number of reasons. We get lots of those reasons every year. I had knee surgery. I'm just not playing where I'm supposed to be playing. I get it. Let's take a look at it and see what we can do. Right? If you end up in this scenario, it's always a great idea to contact us. We do it a lot, and we do it enough for people and help out other committees that if you need help figuring out what should be done, we'll help you out. Okay? Well, but there are some suggestions as to how to do that, and there's some things that to kind of be aware of, but we can certainly help out in any of these scenarios. In considering the available evidence, the handicap committee must decide the most appropriate course of action for any adjustment to a player's handicap index, which can be either one of two scenarios. Either A, you're wanting to reset the handicap index by applying an adjustment to each of the most 20 relevant scores. So you apply the same adjustment to the last 20 scores, which is what you determines their handicap, right? That adjustment is a whole number, and it's the same on every score. And the system actually won't let you do it any different than that. Okay? You just tell it what the whole number is, and it'll adjust those differentials up or down based on what you said. Okay? And so if you want to adjust all of them, if you want to adjust a player's handicap by 3 strokes, you adjust every differential by 3 strokes, and it will automatically do it. Okay? What I like about this system, and this is the one that I default to most of the time if anybody asks how to do this, is that what happens whenever they post a new score? That score is accurate because it's on their bum knee that they had surgery with, right? And then what happens after that? That score is accurate. So everything coming in is accurate now. Everything leaving out the back door is what? It's leaving, right? So as you go down the record, those extra strokes that you've corrected are gradually disappearing to where by the time all 20 fall off, now you're completely accurate again. Make sense? Okay? One little caveat in that is that you should still be paying attention to this player. Because there's a scenario every now and then that knee surgery got better a whole lot quicker than they were expecting. And now we've got an adjusted handicap index that actually is benefiting them because nobody's paying attention. Okay? So still pay attention to their handicap index as long as those adjustments are on it. Okay? So that's scenario number 1. Scenario number 2 is freezing a handicap index. You can essentially assign a number and freeze it at that number. You better do some good math before you do it, right? But you can freeze it at that number and you set an expiration date. Okay? In this scenario, this is also a good scenario. It's not my favorite, but it's a good one. In this scenario, you should always be telling the player how often you're going to check on it to make sure it still reflects, because the computer will still show you what their handicap index should be versus what you've got it frozen at. So you want to tell the player how often you're going to check on it and when it expires. And when it expires, we're still going to look at it one more time. Because when it expires, you had a 3-stroke difference and they still got a 3-stroke difference because they only played 3 rounds, right? Maybe we should lengthen that amount of time. Because they only had 3 rounds played because their knee still hurts. They're not posting scores, they're hardly playing, right? Ultimately, this is just trying to be as logical with helping somebody out as possible and using what's in the system to be able to do so. Exceptional circumstances include a player who has a long-term illness, injury preventing them from playing golf at the level previously attained. There's a clarification in 7.1A/2, basis of the handicap committee applied adjustment for a player impacted by illness or injury. Okay? When a player's handicap index has been adjusted, it will be displayed with an M in their scoring record for modified. Okay? If they're coming to you asking you to adjust their handicap, they better be okay with there being a little M by next to their handicap while it's there. Okay? It just means that manually their handicap has been adjusted by someone who's qualified to do so. It's not a red mark on anybody's handicap. It's just, it's there to help. Okay? Most tournament committee people will see those and they'll say, okay, got to pay attention just in case, right? Because rest assured, if somebody with an M on their handicap comes out and careers it, they're going to be letting their club know, right? Penalty scores, my favorite topic. I know it's nobody's favorite topic, but it's also the topic that is the most needed in the handicap system. As a committee, you should establish rules for why penalty scores could be put on players' handicap, and you should enforce it. 100%. The reasons that you would have a penalty score. Player A is not posting their score. They're on the T sheet every day, but they're only posting once a week. Sounds like a penalty score is warranted to me. Okay? We need to be guarding as best we can. If we're talking about consistency, we need all players to be posting every time they play, regardless of how good or bad it is. My favorite thing, we didn't do this for today, but my favorite thing is I got this page in my office that it's a list of all the reasons people give for not posting their score, and there's not a good one on that list, okay? But I guarantee if we brought that list out, you'd have heard some of them.
I forgot doesn't count?
I forgot does not count.
Come on.
Yeah, right?
My memory's not what it used to be.
In order for the system to be consistent, we must be pushing players to post, okay? So penalty scores are suggested. And if anybody ever calls me and says, my club put a penalty score on there, they can't do that, I'll say, yes they can, okay?
So when you say penalty score, Caleb, you're saying you're posting around.
Yeah, yeah. Having established rules as a committee that are in writing and that you hand to every player in your club is a good thing. What does it do? Number one, when they know it's there, they have no excuse. And it will guard against people not posting. Number two, when you enforce it, you only have to, likely you're only going to have to enforce it one time before they'll start posting, right? So having it well established that you've communicated it is really important. It really helps. It really, really, really helps. Okay? It only takes somebody being the bad guy one time. So assign your favorite person to do that and assign the person that everybody's happy with all the time, right? That's a little bit of a joke, but it only takes one time before you start seeing some different results. Anybody here been at a club that does do penalty scores? Marianne? Yeah? What happens? Does it work?
Oh, yeah.
It works. Yes.
It works.
If they post good or bad,
Yep.
it adjusts.
Yep. It works.
And they did.
And they quit. Okay? Yeah.
So just so I understand, the penalty scores, you just posting what they saw?
No.
No, okay.
Let's say they are a high handicapper and they didn't post the score because they didn't want their handicap to go down. I would post an even par score for their day.
Oh, okay, so,
Okay? Guarantee you they won't do it again. Now, you can also give them a process to appeal. Well, can I go back and post my score and get it correctly? Well, yeah, this time. We'll let you do that this time. Next time it stays. Right? Having a process, written it out, really helps. Okay? It's up to you if you want to establish appeals process or if you just want to say, nope, too bad. Once it's on there, it's on
If
there.
you're in a league, why wouldn't you just have your handicap committee post that score if they didn't post it? Instead
Well,
of being
in
negative
competitions and leagues, yeah, you should do it. That's a part of the system. We're talking about if you're just got your buddies or your gals out there playing and you force them and only 3 out of 4 of you posted. Well, they didn't
They're
post.
golfing all the time, but they're not having.
Right. Everybody knows that person. Let's go after that person. Okay? It's helpful. It's consistent because we're telling everybody to do it. Right? Have rules set in place. Let's say they're a low handicap player. They're a low handicap player and they're not posting when their scores are high. Post 5 high ones. Right? That's a far less scenario. Those are what we call vanity handicaps. They just want bragging rights. That's all they want, and you're killing their bragging rights, okay? Or they need their handicap so low to get into a certain tournament they're really not good enough to play it. That's maybe an occasional situation. Okay? But we highly suggest posting penalty
Do
scores.
you have a kind of a rough draft?
I can work something up. Yeah. Yeah. Okay? We highly suggest penalty scores. They have intentions. If you fail to submit scores, things of that nature. They are identified on the handicap system as a P when you put it in. So, you're not the only one that knows it's there. Everybody that they come in contact with knows it's there because it's a P. You don't see them very often, do you? Okay? This is what we were talking about. Handicap committees should have policies and procedures in place. So here's an example. Failure to post, we'll give you a written warning. Second offense, penalty score issued. Third offense, maybe we don't let you play at an event for a while. You know, there's things that you can do that are at your discretion and capability to do. Okay? But once again, if I can't say this enough, the best policy is to have a policy on paper. So if you don't, you got homework. It's good stuff. You are allowed to withdraw a handicap index. We have a very, very big request that if you're ever withdrawing a handicap, please call us. You're not required to call us, but please call us. And here's the reason for that. If you're withdrawing somebody's handicap because they're cheating, I don't want them playing in my state am. Right? I want to know. I want to know because I want to make sure that they're not playing in my events too. Okay? It doesn't mean they'll never be able to have a handicap again. They'll probably try to go somewhere else. Right? But if I know who it is, and they go join a different club that you're not in, I can call them and say, hey, by the way, you're getting this person. And their handicap was withdrawn at Boise Ranch because they don't know how to post their scores on a regular basis. So something you should probably pay attention to. Right? If we work together on this, it does actually help. Okay? So make sure you're letting us know if you can. Reinstating a handicap index. Handicap committee determines when the handicap index is eligible. So when you withdraw a handicap index, there is a rule. The rule states you have to notify the player when their handicap index will be able to be unwithdrawn. Now, I don't care if you assign it a 50-year timetable. There's no rule that says you can't. So if you want to permanently get them out of there, just say, well, we'll reinstate your handicap in 50 years, right? Or you can do it shorter because maybe the penalty doesn't follow the crime with 50 years, right? We'll say, okay, you're withdrawn for the rest of this year and you can come back next year. But you should, when you withdraw their index, tell them how long it's for. Withdraw it, tell them how long it's for. Hand in hand. Any questions on that? I'm going to try to finish up here really fast. Just a couple more things. There's some changes in the handicap system on recommended allowances for a couple of different tournament types. These are found in Appendix C. If you don't know this, in the back of the book, some of you got a book here tonight. In the back of the book, Appendix C, Match Play 4-ball now has some things in there for what recommended handicap allowances are. Yep.
Can you just explain real briefly what that is, what it does? Because I know it's there,
Sure.
but I've
So-
never really understood what it's for.
Sure. So let's say, I mean, in this scenario, well, we'll go with a very typical scenario because lots of us play 4-balls, or the term that most people use is best ball, which is actually incorrect, by the way. 4-ball. We're playing 4-ball, okay? You and me, we're on the same team. They've adjusted according to the handicap manual. Anybody got it off the top of your head? 4-ball?
90%.
On this one, that one's match play 4-ball. We're going to play stroke play 4-ball. 85%, right? Off the top of my head, I believe it's 85%. So they're taking my handicap. You're a 15, I don't know what you are, and I'm a 7, and they're going to take both of our handicaps down 15%. Why is that? It's essentially saying this, is that in this particular competition, our scores are going to be low. We're just making it to where we're not getting full handicap so that we go out there and shoot 58. We're getting a little bit less, so maybe we shoot 63 or 64 instead. Okay? But because you got 2 chances at making a good score instead of 1. So let's say you play in things like scrambles, right? You got a 2-player scramble, and they'll say we're taking 35% of the high handicap and 60, and what's the number? 65. Good math, right? Good job. 65% of the low handicap, right? And putting them together to form a handicap. That's making it to where it makes sense for the round that the score actually does make sense. Okay? And that's obviously only in net competitions. You play a 4-ball for gross only, yeah, there's no allowances because nobody cares what your handicap is, right? Any further questions on that? Okay. I wanted to show this. This is a question we get every now and then. Well, sorry, let me finish this. Got ahead of myself there. This is the next slide that I started to introduce. With the handicap allowances, please note that handicap allowances in the back of the book are determined based off of field size, okay? Sometimes even field capability. So the slide says they're for net field sizes of about medium size, so 30 to 100 players, okay? So it's totally fine to adjust what the allowance is. You only got 20 players playing, right? Because that adjustment will have less of an impact on 20 players than it will if you're doing it for a full 100 player field. Or if you got a 500 player field, maybe you should be adjusting to more than 85% for a 4-ball, right? The numbers that they use that are in the back of the manual are all based off of 30 to 100 player fields for medium-sized fields. Okay?
So if you have a league with 3 flights, do you give every flight the same allowance?
It's up to the committee to do. Those are discretionary conversations, really. And really all of it's discretionary. Some people base their discretionary off of, whether they want scores to be low or high. Some people base it off of how many complaints they want to field at the end of the event. I mean, there's all sorts of discretionary things here, right? And so it's discretionary. The nice part about using the things in the back of the book is, if any player comes up to you and says, "Why'd you do that?" You say, "Well, it's because it was in the USGA's handicap index manual of what to do, and that's why we did it." They have research behind it. It's not just made up off the cuff, right? I learned that from being a golf pro, by the way, at Hillcrest Country Club. We do it this way because this is the way the book says to do it. Okay? All right, let me get to this point now. This is an interesting picture. It was brought up earlier by Lexi whenever you adjust a plus handicap and a minus handicap for allowances, that they always go towards 0, okay? This is, to a lot of people, counterintuitive. Why would a plus handicap go from a 4 in this scenario to a 3? Why would they get closer to 0? Wouldn't it mean if we're adjusting their handicap, they should get more strokes taken off their score instead of strokes added to their score? Okay? Everybody see what we're talking about here? It doesn't happen very often, but it's one of my favorite topics right now to discuss because we have to think of something in numbers wise, okay? This scenario is for a 4-ball. You can look at the top player A versus player B, okay? They are 20 strokes difference from each other, okay? So if 20 strokes is 100%, what's 85% of 20 strokes? 17. So if you take 85% of 16, that gives you 14. Okay? If you take 85% of plus 3, if you go the other way, you're not at 85% of the two numbers combined anymore. Of the difference, or sorry, not combined, the difference between the two. You're no longer at 85%. Now you're at about 95%. So you're actually penalizing one player over the other player. Okay? So a better way to look at this may be this. Let's say player A, who's a plus 4, let's play them to a 0. Okay? Which means player B, who's a 16, we're going to play them as a 20. Still got that 20 stroke difference, right? What's 80% of 20? What's that?
16.
Excuse me, 85%. I said it wrong. What's 85% of 20? 17. What's 85% of 0?
0.
17. Still your discrepancy between the two players. Plus 3 and 14. What's the difference between the two? 17. It's the same thing. If you don't go that way, the percentages are wrong. You're no longer at 85%, now you're at 95%. Okay? Does that make sense? It's one of the questions we actually get a fair amount of. Now, people will debate whether it's right or not, but it doesn't, if you do it the other way, it actually is no longer following the manual. So you have to know that, right? Okay. That's just a fun question for you math nerds in the room, okay? Is beneficial to you, okay? These are also just other reasons that a review could be involved. All right, let's talk about something related but different than handicapping. There is a system out there, it's actually in the back of this manual, that talks about establishing par for golf courses. Establishing par is something that we do in the course rating system. It is also something that you do for handicap purposes, okay? And basically there is a chart in the back of the book that looks exactly like this that says this is the yardage, and this is for men, right? Or I'm sorry, it has men on the left and women on the right. It says this is the yardage at which par should be for each of these players. It helps establish, what's the big word of the day? Consistency, okay? And so you will find golf courses every now and then that fall outside of this. Usually there's a pretty good reason that they fall outside of this. Every now and then there's not. Just know that if there's not a good reason, we do talk to them, especially when we're doing course ratings, okay? Where appropriate, the standardization of par across tee sets is recommended. It takes into account the way the hole is designed to be played, the playing difficulty of the hole. If the hole is just short of a distance for a par 5, right? But the entire hole is uphill, it really kind of plays more like a par 5, right? Conversely, the hole is downhill all the way. What's my Revere Golf Club? Anybody goes to the Vegas getaway? Revere Golf Club, their 18th hole on one of their golf courses. You hit your tee shot, and if you hit it long enough, you're going to be 100 yards from the green on a par 5 because it's just straight downhill. Now, it makes you feel good, but who knows if it's actually supposed to be that far. Makes everybody feel good, but anyway. Golf course rating, and
Every
slope
course
rating.
needs a hole like that.
Yeah, I would agree. Feel good holes? Yeah, absolutely. There's an adjustment to the course rating system now that allows us to rate golf courses that are shorter than any of the ratings we were allowed to give before. Okay? So for an 18-hole course rating, the minimum distance has always been, that's not an incorrect terminology. The minimum distance last year, the current minimum distance was 4,000 yards for women. Is that right? 3,000 yards, excuse me. 3,000. Russ is in here and he's correcting me and I appreciate that. Minimum was 3,000 yards. Now they've actually made it to where shorter courses can have a rating and still those scores can be posted and then be accurate on your handicap, okay? And so there's a couple courses that we're going to be rating here in the state this year. For instance, the challenge course at Spurwing. It's all par 3s, right? All par 3s? All par 3s, if I remember correctly. Okay? But it actually, we believe it is long enough, based on these new guidelines, to be able to have a rating to where you could actually play it and post your score. Okay?
We know it is because we've already made it.
Even better. See, I didn't even know that part. Okay?
Robin Hood at Falcon.
So there's going to be other courses now that you'll be able to post your score because we've got new ratings because these yardages are allowable. Okay? There's a new minimum length of a golf course. It's 750 yards per 9 holes. Has to be at least 750 yards per 9 holes. Okay? It does turn into a scenario that there is a possibility that you can end up being able to have a rating on the front 9 but not on the back 9. Here, this is what that would look like. Holes 1 through 9. This is the posting part of holes 1 through 9. Let's say the front 9 is 800 yards but the back 9 is 700 yards. Well, they both equal to 1,500. The back 9 is too short to have a rating. So this is the posting guidelines for how to make that happen if you're posting your scores. Okay? Everybody read that okay? You can't post a single 9-hole score on that back 9 because it's too short. But you can post a front 9-hole score and it'll give you an 18-hole, same way the other parts of it. Any questions?
Looked like from that slide, though, that if you played 18 holes, you could post the 18-hole scores. Am I reading that right? It's print small. Not that
Oh.
one, the next one.
The one you just had.
That one there?
Yeah.
Post 18-hole score, receive 18
You
holes.
play 1 through 18, you post 18-hole score.
I believe that is correct.
See? I'm certified and I missed the rule.
You just can't post a 9-hole by itself
Right.
on the back.
That makes sense.
Posting the back nine by.
You can, yeah. You can put, this slide would say the same thing. You can post the total, but you can't post just the back nine by itself. Yeah. See? I'm still learning things. All right, any other questions? Thanks so much for being here. Hope we gave you enough to talk about, especially as you go back to your committees and things to consider, especially penalty scores, how to take care of your players. Oh, let me say one more thing because I didn't say it earlier. There's some software updates coming. We're very excited about these software updates to Admin Portal. In Admin Portal, starting very soon, probably within the next month or so, there are going to be built-in tools in Admin Portal that will flag scores, that will say for the admin, hey, maybe you should take a look at the score. It looks crazy. Okay? So there's going to be new tools in Admin Portal to help you kind of evaluate handicaps and evaluate scores that are being posted.
I have a question that has nothing to do with the admin portal,
Okay.
but with your renew handicaps.
Okay?
Supposedly, what you had told to us before was that we would be able to communicate with all of our players. How do I get access to that as handicap chair?
My apologies. Our software developers are a little slower than we had hoped.
Okay,
You will have access.
okay, great.
We're not there yet, unfortunately.
Okay,
That's
all right. Good enough.
software development always takes more time than you think.
Yes,
It just does.
exactly.
And so we were hoping it was available January 1. We're just not there
Okay.
yet. So,
All right, good.
okay? It's still coming and you will still have that capability. Yeah.
Okay.
Did you say a year?
What's that?
It could be January 1.
No, it should not be a year. Woo! No, should not be a year. My guess is it'll be in the next month or so.
And
Yeah.
also, have you set up the opportunity to do electronic transfers of payments?
We are working on that as well.
Working on that,
Mhm.
okay.
Unfortunately, we can't do that until we have the capability for everybody to log in.
Okay,
So
all right.
I say that, I'm going to double check on that, just to
But
make
it's
sure.
not ready yet.
Not quite ready.